You can start now.
Okay. You want to spotlight first? Welcome to the second episode of season 2 of Gupshup with Gayatri, Old World Conversations with New Age Technology. As many of you know, Gupshup is a series of light and casual conversation on topical issues with domain experts. But light does not make it frivolous. Casual is not the same as flippant. Gupshup is not gossip. Gupshup is the kind of conversation one would normally have in the comfort of one's living room. Does that mean no uncomfortable questions will be asked? They will, but not in the style of high volume toxic television debates. No tutu मैं here. No Bharat पूछता है here. Gupshup is an endeavor to have organic conversations in the age of lockdowns and social distancing. We have to take help of technology because it's a while before we'll actually be able to get together and enjoy each other's company and discuss things that matter to all of us. The past topics of Gupshup have been as diverse as online education, financial planning, feng shui, beauty, wellness, web series, food. Today we'll be discussing emotional and mental wellness with a very versatile, talented, intelligent, enigmatic filmmaker, Vandana Kohli. Welcome, Vandana. It's a privilege to have you here.
Thank you, Gayatri. Thank you for having me on your show.
Vandana has a keen interest in the human mind, behavior, and efficiency. She's a topper from Delhi University, LSR. She's an alumna of FTII Pune and UCLA. Vandana's films have ranged from topics like anger, depression, biotechnology, music, and crime. From 2012 to 2018, she wrote a weekly column for The Week magazine on mind, brain, and psych. Her latest offering is a book titled Hinge: Rediscovering Emotional and Mental Wellness. The book has opened to rave reviews from industry leaders like Kiran Mazumdar Shaw, Cyrus Mistry, Sunil Kant Munjal, academics, and mental health champions too. A request to the audience, you are all a very important part of Gupshup. It's the interactive nature of this conversation that makes it truly unique. So please send us your comments and questions in the chat box, and we'll try and reply to all of them during the matter of this hour long Gupshup. But the first question to Vandana: Vandana, what prompted you to write this book? Is it because mental ill health affects almost 2 billion people every year? Is it because the WHO has labeled India as one of the most depressed countries lately?
Well, Gayatri, that's a very encompassing question. But I think really emotional and mental wellness is the topic of our times, is the concern of our times. Also because, since the advent of the digital world, we've entered a different zone of being. And uh, like for instance, I mean, uh, technology is moving at the pace of the mind, and it seems to be ignoring the rhythms of the body. It seems to be ignoring the rhythms of our emotions. We are just trying to keep up. So the systems around us more and more are not supporting wellness as much as we would naturally expect them to support. Also, because for me personally, actually, the mind has always been an enigma and a very interesting space for exploration. And I've been doing it for noting my own thoughts, noting the patterns of thoughts, noting how emotions work. And the impact they seem to have on our choices, on our decisions, on our reactions, on our responses. So, for me, really, the journey began in 2002 when I was commissioned to make a film on major depression called Into the Abyss. And that was a big challenge. It was to do with anything to do with the mind, to make a film on. You see, it's intangible. So how do you then put together visuals and sound to be able to create what's going on in the human mind? You know, how do you recreate those conversations? And during the research of that film and the making of that film, I got even more interested. And after that, I was commissioned, amongst other projects in the middle, to do a film on biotechnology, which was actually a great boon towards my own understanding of the human body and the human mind, because it was an overview of biotechnology in India. And I had to, we were doing the production. We could only make one trip with the camera team because that's the kind of budget we had. It was a decent budget. But it took about 7 months to make those preparations, to contact everybody. And during those 7 months, I had to read on the subject because I was meeting experts from the field. I was meeting the leading industrialists, the leading scientists. And unless you know the subject and what they were working on, I couldn't have even asked them the right questions. So the thing about documentary really is that you are left at the end of the film, once the film is done and you hand it over to whoever's commissioned it, or once you made it, even if if you've personally produced it, you're left with the knowledge of that subject. To a large extent, because as a filmmaker, you have to understand things before you're able to communicate them further. So biotechnology, that film on biotechnology called Life Encoded, left me with a reasonable overview, I would say, of physiological systems, of building blocks, genes, DNA, receptors, enzymes, and the mechanism of action of a lot of drugs, of different medicines, on research on that and all of that, which actually helped in one's understanding of wellness physiologically as well as mentally. And emotions by far, I think, are most powerful, experiences, are emotional experiences. So to understand, I feel that I really feel that we have to, if we can understand how emotions work for each of us, how does anger work? What is stress? How does it work? What is the trajectory of depression, for instance? I think we would put ourselves in a situation where we not only do ourselves a service, but it would also expand our understanding of people around us who may be experiencing these emotions. So really, that's what led me. Many years of writing, many years of research, and then of course I forgot to mention I made this film on anger called The Subtext of Anger, which gave me so much research, because it was shot here, it was shot in the UK, and it was shot all across the US with leading experts of the world, from Harvard and Yale and Stanford. Wisconsin, Madison has Dr. Richard Davidson, who's very well known with techniques of the brain. They're mapping the mind and the brain. So I was left with so much material, it gave me a scientific basis for stuff that I had inherently been interested in. And so all that put together is what Hinge is about.
So in a way, this is about 20 years of work, 2 decades of work that you've put into this book.
Yes, I would say that, certainly. Yes, because I started seriously writing down emotions and all my insights, if I may, or my observations on how the mind is working and what impact it may have on our emotions, how the emotions impact the brain or the mind. And yes, it's about 20 years, a little more than 20 years, actually.
And how did you decide on the title Hinge?
Okay, that's interesting.
I would have thought, yeah.
Hinge, actually, when I started, sorry?
I said very unusual.
Well, I hope it's an interesting title. The whole point of an interesting of a title is that the moment you see that or you read that title, you should want to reach out to it. At least I hope that's what it does. But it was the most appropriate title I could think of for everything that I was writing. Interestingly, when I started doing an initial draft of the book, I called it Unhinged. And then that actually the project stopped for a while. And when I took it up again, Unhinged just didn't work. It was too negative. It seemed too dark. I had to say so much more, not only about emotional distress, but also about ways of tools and techniques that I found very effective in terms of managing distress, in terms of overcoming distress, in terms of observing it, and moving towards wellness. So Unhinged wasn't the right topic at all. And Hinge also, to my mind, the mind is often a pendulum. If all of us notice the way the mind works, if for instance we are stuck in the past about something that is unresolved, the mind actually, even while you're in the present, part of the mind is at that point. And then when it finds itself a new, when it lets itself go from the past, it suddenly goes that much more into the future, because then the future is wrought with anxiety. So you will notice even through the day, if there's something that you didn't do in the morning and you keep thinking about it, the moment you're in the present, actually your mind will swing into the evening and what you need to do in the evening. So the mind is pretty much a pendulum. And this pendulum actually for me was more like a door on two hinges. And when I talk about emotional distress, sometimes it can be so intense that it's almost like one hinge comes apart. So how do we keep those hinges strong? And it's not just about the mind. Emotional and mental wellness is not just about the mind or just about emotions. In my understanding, limited understanding, it is really about the center point within you, which is that stable core. So the hinge is actually is like a center shaft around which the mind and the emotions work, and it is that center shaft that we need to align ourselves to.
So you mentioned this inner core, and how does one, kind of identify that, and how does one center oneself so as to remain hinged, not become unhinged? Is there? I mean, this is there are no easy solutions here, but if you would give some tips on, how one can identify that.
Well, I'm hoping you'll read the book.
Yeah.
Because it's taken me to write a book to really address that question of yours. And the book, the book has 3 sections, if I may, very quickly. The first one is defines normal. And because if the definition of, we have to understand what is the large definition of normal. Because if normal is very narrow and very rigid, then the definition of abnormal perforce becomes much wider. So the first section defines normal. The second one is called Unhinged, which talks about emotional and distress caused by social or psychological triggers, which is where it talks about different emotions, how they work, their trajectory, the nature of those emotions, how they impact us, as objectively as I could possibly write it. And at the same time, trying to give you a feel of how it feels. How does it feel to be depressed? Depression has become such a common word, but how does it feel for you, me, or somebody we know who's undergoing clinical depression, major depression? How can one get caught into a loop of anger? Most of us don't realize, but very often many of us are caught in this loop of anger. So how does anger then, how do you break out of that loop? So that's Unhinged, and Hinge is final. And then the third section is called Hinge, because it discusses, it puts forth various tools through various layers. There's the layer of, there's logic, where it lays down very simple tools for you to pick on so that you can reduce the levels of your stress. You have a larger perspective over things. There's body. It talks about how you could work with your body. The small things that you can do through the day, the triggers that your body may be, physiological triggers to anger and stress, which if you address, half your levels can come down drastically. And it talks about thought, which is mind, and it talks about heart, because you cannot ignore the heart. In all our talking of the mind, in all our talking about mental illness or disorder, I think the root really lies in emotional disorders, in distress, in emotional distress. So there's the heart. And the final chapter is center. So, for me to tell you about the center, I think would be very, it would, I wouldn't do justice to it for me to say it in a minute or two.
Yeah. So everyone needs to go and, pick up the book or like-minded
Well,
seminar.
I certainly hope you do, but I can tell you that it's an easy read, or at least I think it's an easy read.
Yeah, no,
Mostly it's an easy read.
it is easy. Yeah, it's not sort of to everyone sitting here in the audience. I'd just like to say it is an easy read. It's not, full of jargon, things that you won't understand. Vandana has written it in a very conversational style, and there are lots of uh, incidents involving people, and why they became the way they were. Was it an incident in childhood? Someone was unhappy in a marriage. Someone came from a joint family and went to a nuclear family and didn't know how to adjust in that kind of a situation. Vandana, coming back to your book, and in the section on normal, you say normal in Indian families means compliance, to merge yourself into things that keep the established arrangement in place. And this is a cause of a lot of stress. And I think I so agree with this that, in India, normal means compliance. And we can see it reflected all around us, not just in our family life, but maybe, at a political level also. We all want to, we are
Uh,
ready to just comply with whatever is being told. And, in case you want to express a different view or some dissent, then it becomes a talking point.
Yes, novel. I have broadly, of course, it does tell you why we arrive at those conclusions, but that conclusion, though it's not a defining conclusion, but yes, normal does mean to a large extent compliance. It means, as I understand it, it means also, something that keeps the established status quo in place, something that does not challenge the established status quo. So till it's anything out of that gambit is abnormal. If you want to do your own thing, if you have your own identity and you want to pursue your own identity within this rigid structure, within the structure that sometimes is rigid. I can't say that it's always rigid, but it's sometimes rigid. Normal means to say yes and go along with everything that the structure wants you to do, or the stuff that is defined. These are how your social relationships should be. This is how you should be you conducting yourself. This is how you should not question this person and not question that person. So that can be reasonably limiting, I think, to someone who is more inclined towards independent expression. It can be discouraging towards people who want to express and find their own potential, but at the same time are looking for family support. I don't think normal. I think what normal does is it tries to balance the good things that come with being part of a larger community. It's absolutely essential, I think, for us to feel a part of community, but at the same time also recognizing how communities sometimes can become overbearing and can therefore extinguish, if I may, one's independent, one's own independent expression. And so if we and so that's what novel tries to do. It tries to describe that to you so that you can assess for yourself what your own experiences were, how they may have impacted you, the environment may have impacted you. It could lead you to be grateful for influences in your life which helped you express yourself. And at the same time, I think what it hopes to do is for us not to blindly perpetuate a structure that we have, unthinkingly perpetuate a structure. We tend to do that. When we are younger, we think a certain way. As we grow older, we are able to better see things on the other side of older people. We realize that there is truth in that as well. And we genuinely learn to respect it more, even though we may have rebelled against it as youngsters. But as we become older, are we perpetuating the same wheels because it's convenient? So that's what normal tries to address.
Yeah, lot to think about. There's so much in what you've said till now, and I think there's a comment also. There are a couple of comments. Rakhi saying this is technology racing at the pace of the mind and not at the rhythm of the body and emotions. Beautiful metaphor of a hinge. So yeah, it's a lot to process. Andana, you've also spoken a lot about the cost of technology. Would you like to tell us more about what do you mean when you say that technology has a lot of many costs associated with it?
Yes, I think one of the greatest dangers of us using digital technology is us using it indiscriminately because we believe it's free and because there is no cost to it. That is a very dangerous assumption because there's a huge cost in every way. And the most obvious one, of course, as we are all becoming more and more aware of, is the physiological cost. Your neck is down, you're looking at a screen all the time. There are issues with cervical, there are issues with the thoracic, it can lead to perpetual tennis elbows. It can lead to headaches, migraines, it changes posture. You have to see young kids today, they're completely hunched over. That can affect the skeletal, it does affect the skeletal system, it affects the circulatory systems, circulation in the body. And so, I can go on about the physiological costs, and I think we are most aware of those. But at the same time, I think there are other costs. There is a mental cost because we are bombarded with information. We are open to this. We have information at our fingertips, which is a great strength. I don't mean to, downgrade technology. I think it's a reality of our times. But we must understand so that we're able to balance it both ways. So there is an emotional cost, there is a mental cost, there is too much information coming at us. As one neuroscientist told me when I was making the film on anger, he said, when you have information coming at you so quickly, you're using that part of your brain which is designed for instant reactions. But most of the human brain, this whole part of the human brain, the cortex, is designed for deep reflective thought. When you let things be, you think about them, you chew on them, you analyze them, and then you put forth a response. Whereas now, with all this coming at us, we are just instantly reacting all the time. So that part of the brain is becoming stronger. And the other parts of the brain are in danger of falling into disuse. In fact, he told me at that time that, we are creating a new species even as we speak. So that's just one part of it, if mentally. Emotionally, I think, we've allowed children at the click of a button to enter a world which is very informative, but very, very violent and malicious, without any checks and balances. I think the internet is a beautiful tool, and at the click of so much of my book, my films I was able to communicate with people across the world, and we were able to get them for the film. So it's a reality of our times now. But there are no checks and balances, and to my mind, the very definition of civilization is in danger because we've forgotten how to be civil. Our dialogues are not civil on the internet. Very rarely, very few forums they are. And here you put a young person, a child who's 7, 8, 9, 11, 12, and emotional, riding high on emotional intensity, because that's what adolescence is. And pre-adolescence is. The brain has a spurt of development at certain phases in our lives, early on, then around the age of 7 to 10, then in adolescence. So you put them all naturally riding on that emotional intensity in a space which is completely uncensored, and we have no idea what kind of impact that is happening. That's happening on them. How it's impacting them. The other thing is that when you have all this information coming at you, there are very few spaces of stillness. There's very little encouragement that is making you still. We are constantly looking for stimulation, and that's more and more true for children who are constantly on the internet or on screens. And stimulation, if you need to be constantly stimulated, your stimulation is going to become more and more extreme.
So are you
it's like a drug.
Sorry, I said, are you saying that children are paying a disproportionately higher price
it's an indiscriminate price that yes, because I think we haven't highlighted enough the costs of this technology. And so that's the personal cost, that's the mental emotional cost, and of course there is a social cost also. There is this much that I can communicate on a screen, but I don't think it can take the place of meeting a friend.
Actual conversation.
Or meeting, being in ask a performer, ask a singer, ask a dancer, ask a theater artist, ask someone who wants to carry a team along in any, whether it's a corporate or whether ask anyone. I think digital technology and us online communication is like walking on a treadmill. It doesn't take the place of walking in a garden. They both have their spaces, they both have their uses. But there is one other cost that I must highlight, because I think, we haven't heard enough. There hasn't been enough reporting on it. Is the environmental cost of this digital technology. We are told it is free. We are told there is no cost, and nothing can be further from the truth. Just for us to understand the optic cables that underlie all the sea and the oceans, just to get us to communicate to each other, to understand that the servers many of the servers run on fossil fuels. Some, of course, run on renewable energies, but all these servers and data centers that are storing everything that we're doing, from every single picture you're taking to every single message, is running on fossil fuel. And more importantly, every single digital device that we use, whether it's mobile phones, iPads, computers, satellites, any system that communicates digitally, runs needs rare earth minerals. And rare earth minerals, there are 17 minerals. They're not so rare to find, but they're very, very rare to mine because they are so toxic. So there are very few places on the planet that we do mine them. And where they are mined, it's like this reporter, and he was a BBC reporter who wrote about it. He said, if there's hell on earth, it is here. So I think what has happened is that I don't think social media companies have highlighted enough that us sending a message to each other has a huge cost to it. And I'll give you one example. This was a European Union study that happened last year, which said that the 2017 hit song Despacito, was downloaded or was viewed about 5 billion times. And the energy cost of just viewing that one song was equivalent to the electricity used by 5 small Western African countries for 1 year. Like Bitcoin, for instance, we're all talking about Bitcoin, but Bitcoin, just for the algorithms to work themselves out, you need very, very intense mathematical computation, to figure out Bitcoin and blockchain and all of that. And that is equivalent to the entire carbon footprint of Jordan, for instance. So, the list goes on. So what they say is, for instance, they say don't message indiscriminately, which is, you want to send 10 messages, write it as one message if you want. So I think we need to have this information so that we can be more informed users.
More aware, but that's the next question was, but do we actually have a choice in today's day and age? I mean, we really can't function without technology. Even this conversation is happening over Zoom because we can't sit together in a real world environment. So then should we limit our time on our screens, especially those of our children? Is there a proper time? Is there some research to show that this is how much it should be and not above this?
Yes, reams and reams of research. No more than an hour and a half or 2. Yes to all your comments.
1.5 is for children or even for adults?
For everybody.
So this
for
is
everybody.
So this is apart from, I mean, if I'm working, if I'm working from 9 to 6 and now over technology, and then 1.5 hours over and above that for enjoyment, entertainment. Or
no, look, if let's not be impractical. I don't mean this to be an impractical suggestion at all. I do feel if you're on a computer now, fine. You have to work 5 hours on a computer. You have a Zoom call. You have many things to do. But what you can do is get up and walk every half an hour. You can get up and stretch for 5 minutes every hour or so, an hour and a half. So you have to realize that, this is not the cool way ahead. Technology is a part of our lives now. There's no going back. But the other thing, the other thing to know is that we are companies, and I have nothing against business. I think business is a is very essential for human enterprise. I do think that though businesses have to put forth a balanced point of view, they have to tell you these are the costs. They can't pretend that there are no costs. That is my problem with a lot of technological companies. And for instance, everything, I wrote a lot about it in Mindscape, and I was very happy to see Social Dilemma, because it puts together a lot of what many of us were concerned about in one film. So I don't know how many people have seen it, but it validates a lot of those concerns.
Yeah.
So so I'm not saying that you shouldn't use technology. That's impractical. But if you, like I said, instead of saying, on a group chat, instead of sending 10 messages, if you really need to send those two, then send those two. So that you're helping yourself, you're helping everybody else as well. It's a lot of noise, especially for children and for a lot of adults also. It's a lot of noise in the head.
Some targeted advice to parents of young children here, because in this day of online education, people are grappling with it. Online education has many costs, and the students are tired, the teachers are tired, socializing is not happening. Children are up to a lot of mischief. Any tips you would like to give parents of young children?
I would say, I would say that do encourage them to play some sport, anything physical. It could be riding a bike for half an hour. It could be going and playing cricket, something that we used to do as children. It is absolutely essential that we come back to the mode of the body instead of sitting in front of a screen through so many hours. I know that it's been very difficult for parents. For all my friends who have children, for my relatives who have children, it's been very, very difficult. It's been enjoyable in some ways, but very difficult in other ways. It's difficult for the children also. This is an exigency. I think we're hoping that sooner or later they will be able to go back to how schooling was. But even when they were in school, even before the pandemic, there was so much free flow of devices. I know of a leading school in Bombay, for instance, where there was this huge discussion, and it was almost an acrimonious discussion between parents who said that we shouldn't give our 12-year-olds smartphones, and there were parents who fought and said, no, we must give it to them. They must be smart with their smartphones. Now, I think those are the kind of discussions that we have to take more seriously. Earlier when we were younger, if a teacher had to inform a class, she would put up a notice on a notice board. If it was practice or if it was getting together at a particular place, we would come and see that notice, and all of us would assemble. Today you have 6 youngsters getting together, and there are 197 WhatsApp messages exchanged just by the time they are in each other's house. I'm here, I'm there, the driver's here, I'm outside your door, I'm ringing your doorbell, I'm in the lift. It's indiscriminate, very indiscriminate.
It's true. And they send two words to each other, not even a particular line. But I think if they knew, these children these days are also very, aware about the environmental cost. But I think this is not something that has been communicated to them. But
yes, it hasn't, and I think Gayatri, I think you also mentioned seeing Social Dilemma. I'm not sure if they mentioned it in the film, but I'm aware of so many of the kids of people who work in Silicon Valley who are designing these apps and designing stuff for us on the internet. Their children go to this particular school, which does not allow a single device.
Yes, absolutely.
Because it knows that this is the cost of that device on the human mind and on a growing mind. So yes, there's this huge debate in our times about freedom and freedom of speech, freedom of expression, all of that. I think freedom is a beautiful word. We all strive towards it, but there has to be some civility. There has to be some understanding of. There has to be some definition. Definition it may be a very rigid word, but some framework within which we can find that freedom. Otherwise, it's just anarchy and chaos.
Absolutely. Moving on to adults from, you've spoken about children. Uh, I read in your book, you mentioned that breathing is a very important, just breathing is a very good way of centering yourself, because when you breathe, you are living in the moment, not in the past, not in the future. Is there something you'd advise everyone?
It's something that we all know. And those words are Tenzing Palmo's words. She's a Buddhist nun. She features in my film on anger also, speaks beautifully. I've attended many of her workshops and her retreats. And she says that, why do we, one very good way of harnessing the mind or bringing it back to the present is to breathe. Just to be aware that I'm breathing in and I'm breathing out, because we can't breathe in the past and we can't breathe in the future. We are breathing only now. So it's a very good way to bring the mind and the body back to the present. And, our
Is this
techniques,
breathing meditation? Sorry, is this what we call meditation?
well, meditation has become a very trendy word, Gayatri. I think meditative techniques involve many other techniques. I think a starting technique certainly is to do with breathing. I would be more comfortable with mindfulness as a word, where you are being mindful of any activity that you're doing, whether it's breathing, whether it's eating. For instance, when I have many things going on in my mind and I sit in to eat, I try as much as possible to taste the first morsel of the food. To when I take that first morsel, I do it really consciously. I know that in the next 30 seconds, my mind is going to wander again. But that first morsel I put in my mind and I allow myself and focus, I bring myself to a point where I can enjoy how it tastes or feel how it tastes and feeling grateful for the fact that it's there. Yes, so that's mindfulness, that you're doing something, you do it mindfully. You are opening, you're making yourself a cup of tea. You actually are mindful about how your hand is moving. You're mindful about how you're putting the sugar. You're mindful about how it's again, in 30 seconds, the mind will wander again. That's the nature of the mind. But these small spaces of this harnessing of the mind through the day over mundane tasks, how you're opening your door, how you're walking, how are you going down the stairs, anytime that you remember, become great harbingers of harnessing the mind and bridging the connect between mind and body. So mindfulness is something that I would emphasize more, because meditation, I think, requires a more concerted effort. And there are very defined, as I said, techniques to meditation. The easiest, of course, is breathing. We've known it, anyone who practices yoga, in any form of yoga, whether it's introductory, whether it's advanced, is familiar with breathing techniques as something that leads you to a meditative state. And a meditative state here is not some mystical state. It is just a state where you feel more calm and gathered, where you're more collected with who you are, with all that is positive within you, to my mind. And I think that is a state we all naturally have. When we are children and when we were playing or we were dancing or we were singing, this is a state that came to us so naturally. And it's other things that have pulled us out of it. And so it would help to find that state for us again. And I don't think it's something that you need to add on. It's not like one other big thing on this huge load of stuff that we already have. It is really the dropping off of things. It's more letting things drop off. It's something that we arrive at more easily than as a very concerted or a very tense or a very rigid way of approaching it.
Happen more naturally, if I'm getting you right.
Yes, thank you. That's right. That's the word, more naturally.
Yeah. Okay. We'll take an audience question now, Vandana. This is from Bindu Tandon. She's saying, would you agree that finding a heartfelt job and involvement in something, love for something to pursue, is one of the ways to find a center?
To find a job, sorry, say that again.
Would you agree that finding a job that you really want to do and involvement in something, a love for something to pursue, is one of the ways to find a center?
Yes, I would say that. I would say, yes, that is one way. And I would also say that respecting the job you have while you find a passion to pursue also is also a way to find the center. It's not necessarily only doing what you like, it's also how you do the things that you do. So it's really an internal shift. So both, yes, both things.
Vandana, there are many different facets to your personality. You're also a photographer, you're also a musician, and you've recently become an entrepreneur. So, for those who don't know, Vandana started her own line of comfort wear, which she calls Tulip. Do you want to tell our people more about it? And I have to say that I've tried your Tulip comfort wear and I find them extremely comfortable. So,
Thank you so much. Thank
from
you.
mental and emotional space, how do you get into the world of business and clothes and fashion?
Well, Tulip is, thank you for bringing it up and mentioning it. Tulip comfort wear, that's what we call it, is really that. It's to make us comfortable. I found that comfortable clothes were not made one feel very jhalla. I really think that's the word, jhalla.
Jhalla.
And I was tired of trying to find comfortable clothes that were comfortable and trendy at the same time and smart. The idea came from wanting to wear a trouser that could be very as comfortable as anything can be, at the same time be smart enough to take a flight in, comfortable enough to sleep in if you have a long flight, and smart enough to get up in the morning and go for a meeting without having to change what you were wearing. That was the idea, really. And so I started working on it, and I found that nobody's working, at least not to my knowledge. There may be people working on women's abdominal health when it comes to clothing. Our bodies change through the month, our bodies change through the day. And it depends on water retention, it depends on what we've eaten. And for someone who I live in my trousers and my tops, and I love my Indian wear as well, but I feel that it was a struggle, it was a challenge to find something that was comfortable. And so I thought, okay, then if I can't find it, I might as well do it.
Yeah.
And a friend of mine is in a related field. He has a space. He's into leather, actually, but he offered me some support, and thanks to his support, I was able to get down with this. But to bridge your question about from this Hinge to Tulip, I think what Hinge tries to offer, Hinge is really a sharing for inner comfort. It's observations and experiences and tools and techniques that I hope will lead anyone who reads it to some sense of comfort, a centered comfort. And Tulip comfort wear is my attempt at external comfort.
From the internal to the external. I have to say, I think your comfort wear, I mean, I think in the pandemic, it's been in many ways. I think I can speak for myself when I say that, I have stopped wearing trousers. I am only in the bottom half of me is only in comfort wear. So I think
Okay, I'm not sure what style you have, but I don't know whether you have the same style or you have different styles. But I do encourage you to try the other styles also. And I'm very proud of the denim that the jeans that we have made, because I challenge you won't find a more comfortable pair.
that's arrived. I haven't tried it on yet. But moving back again to another serious question. In the pandemic, I mean, there is so much of, I mean, there's so many unpleasant things happening around us. It's so tragic and depressing. It's so easy. I mean, I know that many of my friends are feeling overwhelmed. Family members are feeling overwhelmed with the situation. Well, how can one protect one's sanity in this pandemic infused world? I mean, the first year, 6, 8 months, we tried. We were happy spending time with the family, cooking and playing games and doing online yoga. But it's been a year and there's no end in sight. So how do we, I know you've answered about centering. Is there anything else? How does one prevent oneself from getting overwhelmed?
I think the most effective thing to do, very briefly, is to watch your reactions. Because when we are stressed and we have a sense of entrapment, and we tend to react more and more, and then it becomes a spiral. This person in front of you says something, you react to it, he reacts to it, she reacts to it. It just becomes a spiral, and the spiral's out of control. I think the thing to do is to forget about what the others are doing, but just take responsibility for what you are doing. And I truly believe that's the only thing we can do at any point in time. And that's enough to begin with, rather than try and change this and change that, which is really, I think, more often a myth that, I'm going to change this and I'm going to change that. I think there's just so much to work within ourselves, our own selves, and there's so much to work on, that if we just turn the focus onto, I would say do that. I mean, I've been trying to do that for my own sake, and watching my reaction, and it's very empowering to do that. What that also does is it bridges the gap. I think there's some disturbance. I'm not.
There's some disturbance, yes. Sanjana, would you like? Why don't you mute everyone and then we'll unmute ourselves, Vandana and I. It's okay now. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So I think that's one, to turn the focus onto our own responses, and the second is just to watch the impatience. I think, if we feel, okay, it's been a year and a half, I know it's gotten everybody's nerves, we're all experiencing it. But to watch that impatience, when is it going to end, when it's going to end, because that just adds to the stress of it all. You just have to say, what is the next task I need to do? What is the next thing I need to do? I know that the moment this talk is over, I'm going to go and fix myself a nice cup of tea. That's all. I don't have mind space for more than that. And I think that's what we need to do. What after that? That's it. As long as you throw in some physical exercise, it could be a walk, it could be half an hour of stretches, it could be dancing, anything that catches your fancy. And if you can't find that half an hour, 1 hour chunk together, do it in 5 minutes, do it 2 minutes through the day. Believe me, I don't think there's anything more effective than that and simpler than that. It doesn't require you to be outside. It doesn't require for you to change anything in your external environment. It's just for you to get up and do it. As the Nike ad says, just do it.
Just do it, yeah. Okay. I'm wading into some bit of a controversial topic here. I mean, I remember reading your very eloquent article you wrote after the tragic demise of Sushant Singh Rajput. And you would say, and you said, if only he had reached out, then maybe things would have been different. Do you think he was also in some ways overwhelmed with things, with the world in which he was living?
Certainly. I mean, that's my understanding of it. Of course, there have been so many different points of view, but I personally would believe, yes, he was completely overwhelmed. It's not easy, which is another cost of this technology, all this information, all these digital platforms. Today, an actor, for instance, is not just an actor. He has to market himself more than being an actor. It requires you to make all these appearances. It requires you to be active on this platform and that platform. Earlier, an artist, for instance, a painter, would just paint, and his work was done. And now it's more about how much noise are you creating, more and more. And because it's so noisy already, you have to create even more noise to be able to be heard, which is very tragic, because we talk about discrimination. I think today's time discriminates against people who are naturally quiet, people who are naturally thinking. Sorry,
I said someone like you, naturally quiet. I would associate that with you. Am I right?
Well, thank you for saying that. I do believe that my natural tendency is to be more quiet, and I do find that there is no space to be quiet. If you're quiet, at least in my sake, for my own self, I don't feel it so strongly. But if you're quiet, you're left behind. You're not making enough noise. You have no presence on social media, and you're dismissed more and more easily. That's a very unfortunate. because it reminds me of something that a professor of mine had, a friend of mine who's an English professor in Delhi University told me once. He said, with cutoffs for English literature being 90, 95, 98, we are no longer going to get the student who is actually interested in literature. So I asked him why, why are you saying that? He said, because the boy or girl who's naturally interested in literature is not going to get 90, 95, 98. He or she is going to be sitting under a tree reading and will therefore get a 60 or 65. So the system discriminates against a certain potential, and that is dangerous. It's dangerous for our society as a whole. That you have to be more and more noisy, you have to be more and more with it. It's great, that's a celebration as well, but it's not the only way. It shouldn't be the only way of being. And I think, therefore, coming back to Sushant Singh Rajput, I think that he was an extremely talented person. I personally didn't like him very much when I saw him the first time, but when I saw him in Dhoni, I thought he was so good. When I read about him later, also his friends have spoken about him. People who worked with him have spoken about him. For instance, one person said that he came to a set with a script which was 3 times the size of the script that she had given him. So she asked him, she said, "What's in your hand?" He said, "Your script." And she said, "But my script is not so thick." He said, "Well, I made my own notes." And so for every page, he had 5 pages of notes. Now, so someone who's that intense, with all this noise and information, and you have to be with it, and you have to look good, and I think it's too much. I think, and that's why I feel that technology is a beautiful tool. It has connected all of us in so many different ways. Ask grandparents. But at the same time, we have to know that there's another side to it. And for our own sake, we have to find, for our own selves, we have to find a center point. We have to find a point of inherent balance where it doesn't impinge on our emotional and our mental wellness and our physical wellness.
Okay. So if I could just invert that and say, that at which stage, is there a way of identifying that, one is really getting overwhelmed and maybe one needs some kind of external support? Is there some way of identifying that?
Uh,
I mean, I
well,
know it's a difficult question. I mean, so
the thing is, basically, I think we need to nurture some relationships in our lives. Having at least 4 or 5 people whom we have a meaningful relationship with is very important. Yeah, it could be a friend, it could be a family member, it could be both if you're fortunate. It could be a teacher, it could be a professor, it could be someone younger, but those relationships we must nurture. And I think in many ways digital technology actually allows us to do that also, which is what I mean, which is why I say we need to find that center point. So a point to reach out. Look, the depression, for instance, has a very similar trajectory. You begin to feel low for more than a period of 3 weeks, and it's a very crushing kind of low. It's like a pointlessness and a hopelessness, and there are too many feelings of guilt. And then nothing's going to come out of anything you do. I think what is more important for each one of us is also to keep an eye on people we care for and not dismiss those signs. Because we want to, A, we don't want to deal with it, B, we don't recognize it, C, we really believe that this is something that is just passing, which is also what Hinge is trying to do. Hinge is trying to talk about these things in a way that you're able to spot it. You're able to understand it from an experiential point of view so that you can spot it.
absolutely. So yeah, nurturing relationships. So I mean, it's nearly 6 o'clock. Audience, if you have any questions, do write them to us. There are lots of comments I'll read at the end of this. You mentioned nurturing relationships, and it just brought me back to something I read in your book. You did a research to find out, whether children who grew up in a joint family environment and those who grew up in a nuclear family, how emotionally adjusted they were. And surprisingly, you said that there's nothing really different, nothing that really sets them apart. Children growing up in a joint family or nuclear family, in if The only difference was actually the access to technology, and children who have more access to technology are less well behaved.
Yes, well, it's not my study. I'm quoting different studies. There were different parameters. There were different on different, different aspects of nuclear children brought up in nuclear families as opposed to those brought up in joint families. So, for instance, in social relationships, they found that children from joint families scored marginally higher because they had aunts and uncles and cousins, and they were able to talk to all these people. Um, different role models from different age groups. But yes, at the end of it, they did find that there was much difference. What changed was not access to technology, but how long children were on screen time. So the kids who are using screens for more than an hour and a half or 2 hours a day, irrespective of which background they came from, were more badly behaved than that. Yeah. And the second and the more important thing was also equally important, if I may, was the kind of relationship that they shared with their caregiver. So it didn't matter whether you were from a nuclear family or a joint family, but if you've shared a stable, caring, nurturing relationship with your caregiver, that made all the difference.
Yeah. So those nurturing relationships, I think that's what's going to get us through this pandemic, through all the low stages in our lives. There are lots of comments here. I'll read some of them out to you. Vandana, you've brought focus to a very important point. The quieter. It's okay to be a quiet person. Truly, in the noise, such people are not celebrated. We need to pay attention. This is Madhumita. Great sessions. Quality of relationships. Okay. Yeah. Let's move on to, it's nearly 6 o'clock, but the other aspect which we haven't touched on, your personality, is your love for music, Vandana. So you play the piano, you play the guitar, you've released an album of Indian melodies. Which genre of music do you enjoy the most?
Indian melodies.
Indian melodies.
Old Indian songs. And now I have to say, like, really, now, I mean, now that we're in 2021, I have to say very old Indian songs.
Don't make
Because when I say old
it.
Indian songs, when I say old Indian songs, they say, "Oh, you mean the 80s?" I say, "No, I mean the 50s and I mean the 60s." So yeah, very old Indian songs, but I love them really. I think there's such beauties. There were trained singers. Some of them were not even trained actually, to show, but they were singers with such skill. And there were music directors who, were so good. But I think the key really was that you had poets writing lyrics. You didn't have lyricists. So whether it was Sahil Vidhanvi or it was Gulzar or Kefi Asmi, um, or if it was so many others. I mean, they come to me. They were all poets writing lyrics, which is why those songs are just beautiful.
Evergreen.
And the melody, and there was such an emphasis on melody. Now there's an emphasis on the rhythm and the groove, because a song is popular if it can play in a dance club, at a dance venue. That defines the popularity of a song largely. And also, therefore, it's these days many of the songs are difficult to reproduce, because you need that groove and you need this instrument and you need that riff. Whereas the earlier ones, you just have to sing the first mukra, or the first the verse, the mukra and the verse, and the song comes alive.
Absolutely. So that's my first memory of you, you singing and playing the piano in the LSR auditorium. And I have to say, I was completely floored, and I still am. And
Thank
on
you,
that
very
note,
sweet.
can I request you to just, hum or sing or, do something? Just
You know,
get some
I
amount of
know
music. There's
at
Vinny
at
there to
the
help you too.
at the risk of being a wet blanket, but you know what? If it works for you and it works for everybody here, at some point, let's just do a half hour, 45 minutes of music together. I would much rather prefer that.
No?
So,
Nothing.
do
Hum
pardon
song
me,
or
pardon
something.
me this time. You know, I'm not happy singing on the screen. I mean, on over this sound at all. I so much prefer that 5 people or 50 people or 20 people get together in a room, because then everybody sings together. That's what really makes it for me. It's not my voice, or it's not the song that I want to sing as much as make other people sing. That really does something for me.
And I'm lucky to have enjoyed many of those sessions. On that note, I think we'll wrap up today's session. Any other questions? Or yeah, lots of thank yous about such insightful session, interesting session. Music together would be awesome, says Aarti Singh. Please share this on YouTube. Yes, we will. We will be putting it. I'll be putting on the link on galaxy.co for those of you who've missed the beginning. We started dot on time and cost of technology. Yes. So those of you who missed the beginning, there was a very interesting comment from, Rakhi's mentioned this. Technology is racing at the pace of the mind, but not at the rhythm of the body and emotions. And a lot of that is explained in Vandana's book, Hinge, rediscovering emotional and mental wellness. Anjali Bai says, what a profound reflection, being conditioned for instant gratification. While that is not reality of life, it's about perseverance and resilience. Yes.
I so agree.
Resilience. There's also this talk that, this generation, sorry, the last question, that this is a very fragile generation, that the youngsters are very fragile, and maybe even we have become very fragile. We're not resilient enough.
Yes, because I think resilience comes from stillness. And there's nothing around, or there's very little around us that is leading us to stillness naturally. It's in fact, it's pulling us out of our zone of stillness. And emotional stability is about, as the word says, it's about being stable. And that stability comes from stillness, which is why I keep emphasizing the center. The center is a point of stillness. At the same time, it is also dynamic. That is what is beautiful about it. It's not one or the other. It's a point where the so-called polarities actually converge, and you're able to access anything from within yourself. That's how I see it, and that's what I believe it does, and that's how I experience it.
That note, I'll say thank you, Vandana. You've given lots and
Hi,
lots of.
Gayatri. I had a very small question. Can I ask?
Okay, Kanika, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to know how can we watch more of your work, the documentaries. And Vandana, you've been astounding. I haven't heard anybody so articulate, so informative. It has been a pleasure and an honor. Of course, we were not in your times. We are your fachas from college. But this was astounding. So how can we watch more on anger? I remember you putting up this for the ELSA group, and I couldn't attend this on anger and various other stuff.
Well, the anger film I usually screen as part of a 2-hour workshop on understanding and managing anger, because it requires a discussion. It prods so much within you that it requires a discussion. There are some films, of course, on the net. Of such times, I think, is on the net. If you look at that, it's a fun film. There's Into the Abyss, I think, also is on the internet, because these were commissioned films, so the producer has put them up. The anger film also, I put up a low resolution of it. If you do watch it, I do encourage you to watch it with earphones, and as much as possible in 1 or 2 sittings if you can. But I do, I still feel that it requires a discussion. So maybe at some point, if you have a small community who's interested, maybe 10 people or 15 people, we can screen the film, and then, and then we can talk about it right there and then, which is what also I've been doing through the pandemic.
I
Oh,
think,
lovely.
Kanika
And can
does
we join any one of the groups? Can we get a link or something to join a group?
Well, because they're usually certain organizations doing it. So like the Rotarians would do it for themselves, or a particular corporate would do it for itself. So if you, for instance, have a community of 10 people and, send me an email and are interested, I'm happy to, put that time aside and for us to do it. Yeah.
So for those who don't know, Vandana has her own website, vandanakolli.com. Is that Vandana Kohli?
It is. And like all my other social media stuff also, it's in high neglect. But it gives some basic information. It does, yes.
Yeah, so it's there. I mean, if you go there, you can find lots of information. And I think even before you came out with Tulip, Vandana, you always had the tulip as your symbol on your website.
Indeed, I did. It's for my films. I've always used it's a red tulip with the film sprockets on the side, and Tulip Comfortwear is the tulip with a fold rather in the middle. The sprockets have gone, and the color has changed. But thank you for noticing that.
No, thank you, Vandana. It's been such a delightful and insightful session. You've been, as I think Kanika was doing the vote of thanks in a way, and she said, just so articulate, so eloquent, so much to think about. The need to be quiet, the need to be still, the need to find one's center, do some physical exercises, be mindful. Lots, lots, lots. And I think everyone here must really learned a lot from the session. So thank you for joining us today on this episode of Gupshup with Gayatri. We'll be back with another new episode with a new speaker, new topic. Till then, goodbye. Gupshup with Gayatri, old world conversations with new age technology. Thank you.
Thank you so much.